And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today I'm talking with Frank Dew. And well, Frank, first of all, thank you for spending some time with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. It's going to be a great conversation. Frank is he's a business coach, executive coach, but that's not really what we're going to be talking about necessarily. Not the way you normally think about it, because Frank also has gone through and lived out caring for somebody dear to him, and the stress that brings on entrepreneurs, the stress of business, but the health challenges. How do we deal with that and continue to run our business and things? And we're gonna kind of dive deep into an area that is not often talked about. So, Frank, tell me, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
That's a great question, Michael. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 17, run many different types of businesses. I was a certified financial planner. I did that for about 25 years, but I had a trucking company, logistics, a couple of contracted companies. I actually even started a company with a ride share. And so going through that process, I always led people. And people are the cornerstone of your business, not just your employees and your customers and your vendors, the relationships around you as well. And so one of the things that I leaned on a lot was several different coaches. And when I went through that process of being coached, and I saw the value of it, and it really resonated with me, I knew that was what I wanted to do for others too.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you say it. I mean, I preach to my audience all the time. You need coaches, right? I've been in business since 2013. I've had coaches, masterminds the whole time, and it just accelerates your growth. But it's not all about growth, right? It's about mindsets and thinking differently and learning from somebody who's been down a pathway that I'm about ready to go down. Well, why should I try to figure it out myself when a coach can get me there faster and say, yeah, don't go down that road, don't do this. And in your entrepreneurial journey, in your life, you've dealt with not just building businesses, but in dealing with hard life situations that could easily implode a lot of people.
No
And
question.
you work with entrepreneurs to help them manage and deal with that stress, whether it's from business or whether it's from your loved one or yourself going through a health issue. How do you manage that? So unpack that a little bit about some of the challenges entrepreneurs face and how do you work with them?
That's a great topic to really get into. And like you said, it's not spoken about very much.
Yeah.
But I love helping entrepreneurs that struggle with navigating through the stress of running a business while caregiving for somebody close to them. Could be a spouse, could be a child or a parent, brother or sister, anybody close really, and how that affects their lives. And just being a caregiver by itself is a very challenging thing to do, and many caregivers don't put themselves first. And when you end up losing your own health, then you're not much good to care for the one that you're trying to care for.
Right.
Meanwhile, trying to do that and run a business is extremely challenging. And even when it comes to if I have several clients that have had cancer themselves and survived that, and so how do you run a business while going through that? It's quite challenging.
Right. No, I can't even imagine what that would be like. I've had people who've had children going to the hospital for weeks at a time, and
Yes.
they run pharmacies or they're business owners, and I'm like, how do you do that? And it's at one level trying to keep the business just operational, but nobody talks about the stress that's there, the emotional collateral that takes place, and then the mental collateral that must follow that. Is that fair?
Every time. And one of the things that I see is a common thread with a lot of entrepreneurs is they're driven individuals in the first place. That's why they're on their own business. And as a result, a lot of times these people are also, I'll just kind of say, control freaks. They like to control what their surroundings and their outcomes. And as a result, they try to control being a caregiver and running a business without asking for help.
Yeah.
And then, even if they did have the insight to ask for help, who do you ask? Where do you go? And so there's not a lot out there for the entrepreneur that needs that type of help. And so that's what my focus is to really be able to be there for those people.
That's amazing because yeah, you're right. I mean, entrepreneurs, we're a different breed. I mean, we think differently. And I can only imagine going through something and needing to talk with somebody, finally getting to the point of saying, okay, I need help. But to go to a typical counselor, which is good, they don't understand the entrepreneurial nature and the drive. And so how do you work? I mean, unpack a little bit about that.
Sure. And just from personal experience, for an example, I don't think I could have held down a job. So for about 20 some years, my wife had chronic depression. And so running a business through that, I'd have to leave unexpectedly at any given time. Probably couldn't have held down a job. So running my own business, at least I could do that. But you end up burning the candles at both ends. And so through that process, though, one of the things that I noticed is the support from the personal side to really involve your friends, to ask for help, to swallow that pride, and to ask for people's help from the relationships around you is extremely important. And there's a lot of shame around that, and to swallow that shame and to move forward and ask for help. People want to help you. There's a lot of people in almost everybody's lives that are out there to give a hand. Your community, right? And so be it from your work relationships, your family relationships, church or religion, even the community at large from the healthcare side. There's a lot of opportunities there for help. But that said, when it comes to navigating through that, then there also needs to be some very focused strategy to get through from a business side of you. So just like your health, if you don't put yourself first, you're no good to the caregiving person that you're working for.
Yeah.
On the other side too, when your business falters, then that's usually the only income that the household has. And so, and that of everything, you don't want to have money problems on top of everything else. And so to make sure that your business is being run as close to a self-managing company as possible is another part of the aspect that I coach people through. Because there's a set strategy that you work through based on each person's business, each person's situation. But if you don't have a plan, before you know it, you're in the wrong forest. And so you have to really sort of marry the two things together, marry the balanced personal life, asking for help on those relationships, but also then what is the most important activity you can do? What's the most effective activity you can do to keep your business running and profitable while you're going through the storm?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really good because I can only imagine if an entrepreneur is in a normal coaching program, okay, with a normal coach, bringing personal hard things to the table, many times that coach really probably won't know how to deal with that because I mean, I've not had a ton of hard emotional things in my life.
You're fortunate.
I'm very blessed, right?
Exactly.
So I could sympathize. I don't know that I could empathize, and I wouldn't have a pathway. Whereas you've been there. So when somebody comes and says, okay, here's what's going on, and it could be like we talked a little bit. I mean, it could be cancer, it could be depression, it could be a wayward child, it could be 1,000 things that weigh down on you, that steal your motivation, that cause you to go on. And at the same time, I've got a business to run. I've got people to care for. And to come to somebody like you and say, okay, Frank, here's what's going on in my life, and just throw it all out there and let you empathize because you've been there, and B, have a path forward.
Yes.
Has to be mind-blowing.
Well, and the path forward starts, what's the process? Really, it starts with triage. You go into the emergency room and that's what happens. You get triage, right? And so from a business coaching perspective, that's what I do with people. And we identify what's working, where the weaknesses are, where you're bleeding, and make sure that we find a day-by-day path forward that's manageable for you and that keeps together the business that is really keeping the family together at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and that's good. And yeah, wow, I'm walking on thin ice here, but I'm thinking the guilt that could be on an entrepreneur who says, I need to be with my spouse, child, whatever, but I have to go to work to keep this thing going. And I should be here, but helping them deal with that with prioritization and bringing resource. Is that, I assume that's what people can deal with, right?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Mindset is a big, well, it's everything. I see people trying to compartmentalize their lives, but it's not realistic to, be with the person that you're caregiving for, see how the struggles they have, and then walk out the door and then put on, okay, I have my work hat on now.
Yeah.
And just, flip the switch. People aren't built that way. And so how do you integrate that into your life and still have the gratitude and peace within you to be able to move forward day by day,
Right.
and be productive while doing it?
Yeah. And so as you work with entrepreneurs at all levels, I mean, what's like an ideal, or does it matter if somebody's an entrepreneur and they're 2 years in business or 20 years in business, does that matter?
It doesn't, no. And right now I'm actually coaching in 9 different industries. And
Mm,
so I love that diversity. And not everybody that I coach are in this situation.
right.
But the ones that I do, uh, they're right now in 3 different industries. So because one of the things that I see in all the different industries is business is business. And and so there's some basic areas in business that I can help people with, and especially when it comes to the caregiving side of things, to help manage that part of their lives. But it's really the same work that I do with people that aren't in a caregiving situation. It just means there's one less thing that they have to deal with, and or many less things that they have to deal with. Really, what it comes down to, but to live intentionally and to work through your business with intention, with enthusiasm, to really be able to serve those that you choose to serve, to do your passion is a real gift. And do you get up every day and just kind of go through the motions and do your business because it's getting you money? That's great. But one of the things that I've recognized is I like to work sort of in 4 different freedoms. There's the freedom of time, which is definitely important if you're caregiving or not, and the freedom of money. Money, like we know, it's a tool. If you don't have enough of it, then it's a problem, and even when you have lots of it, it can be a problem. So you have to have the freedom of money, and then the freedom of people, like the relationships that you have. If you don't like your clients, if you don't like your employees, if you don't like your vendors, then you're probably not going to have a very nice life,
Right.
and it will show. And
Yeah.
so, if you have the relationships around you in your personal and business life, then you have a much fuller life to live. And then freedom of health. I mean,
Mm,
really, at the end of the day, we love talking about work-life balance, but I hardly ever see it.
right.
And you know, I depending on what your beliefs are, as we are today, we're going to be dead for a long time. And so
I love that.
while we're here, we might as well enjoy our lives, right? And
Yeah.
and the idea that you have to suffer and then you die, and then there's something better later. That's great, but while we're here, you might as well enjoy your life too. And so, how can you do that in business? And when you live above the line and you live as a victor versus below the line as a victim, it makes a huge difference in your day to day. Are you living with abundance or you're living in scarcity? And those principles connect with if you're caregiving for somebody or if you're not.
Yeah.
A lot of times I see people that aren't caregiving, that have so much in their lives and they don't even notice.
Yeah. Well, and that's so true. And um, I recently joined a strategic coach. Been listening to Dan Sullivan for a long time, and he has this whole concept of always measuring backwards, right? And gratitude. And I think too many times as entrepreneurs, we are just so forward focusing that, and you never get there versus stopping and looking back. And I just did this a couple weeks ago for our company. because I needed to. It's like, okay, we're not getting to where we need to go. Blah, blah. And then I stopped and I looked backwards and I went, wow, that we've really done, this is awesome, and shared with my team and things. And it brought much joy. So that's kind of what you're saying there at one level, right?
No question. I mean, one of the things Dan Sullivan talks about is the gap. And so the fact that we're here where we are today, there's an ideal somewhere out there. And the closer and closer we get to that ideal, we keep moving the gap, and the ideal never gets attained. When I mentioned earlier that I had coaching myself for a long period of time. For about 15 years, I was coached by Dan Sullivan.
Okay.
And the strategic coach is a beautiful program and really, really helped me.
Yeah. And it's just, I always tell my audience, you need coaches in your life.
No question.
You need outside perspectives, not just to grow your business, but sometimes to say, you know what? I remember Dan Sullivan, when he first met his wife, Babs, she's like, okay, we're going to do this, but you're going to start taking free days. You're going to take time off. And Dan's like, what? I'm an entrepreneur. I have to work. And it's just a funny story to go, yeah, you start reorienting life, but we need that outside perspective. And you can get the concepts from a book to start the idea, but there's nothing like spending time with a coach on a regular basis to go, okay, Frank, here's what's going on. Here's what keeps hitting me. Here's what I'm struggling with. And the thing I love about great coaches is you ask great questions.
Well, that is the key. One of the other things that I notice about probably more than half of what I do with everybody that I work with is a version of accountability. And so it's not that, Michael, you said you were going to do this and you didn't, so you're going to slap in the wrist. It's not about that. It's about all the noise and all the things that get in the way of you wanting to do what you want to do. And so the accountability of making sure that you stay on track with living your best life, that's to me what accountability really is.
Yeah, and that's good. And a coach really helps you understand what is that life, because so many times we get distracted. I just came out of a conference in Orlando last week, and dude, it was great. But all the speakers were all multimillionaires, had multi-million-dollar projects, had multi-million. They had and I sat there and I looked at the room. I'm like, about 98% of that room is not anywhere near that, and it's aspirational. But then it comes out to go, oh, I gotta go do that. I can't do that. And we need somebody to help us reformat what one of my favorite marketing strategists, Roy Williams, starts out with every client. He says, here's the question. How do you define success? And he gets that from a client, and he says that forms everything of how our relationship is going to work and what we're going to do to grow your business. That. And I think a lot of people cannot answer that question.
That's right. Yeah. And one of the reasons is people are so busy just trying to perform. And so, to really look inward and understand what your why is, the Simon Sinek thing, but it goes a long way. And, the other aspect from a entrepreneurial standpoint that I really believe in, and that is, it actually, Dan wrote a book on who, not how.
Yeah.
And you think about who in your life can you engage in helping you get to where you want to be it in the caregiving role or being it just in running your business. It's who, not how you do it.
100%.
And so it's to also lower the barriers of understanding what you're really good at. And just do that. And what are the things that you should fire yourself from?
Absolutely.
Like, when you catch yourself doing payroll for 50 people every 2 weeks and you think how much time it takes, you think, is that the best use of your time? Right. And I see it like we have this three eyes of the business owner. A lot of times it's, the technician versus the manager versus the entrepreneur. And so, if you're running the McDonald's franchise, are you at the cash every day? Probably not. Yeah. Being at the cash once in a while is probably a good thing because then you have a good understanding of what's going on there. Right. But that's not the best use of your time. Right. Nor is running the restaurant on a shift as a manager. So, where are you in your business, and are you empowering your people to do the stuff that you hired them for?
Yeah. And that's hard enough as an entrepreneur, let alone an entrepreneur who's helping, serving a loved one in need of some nature, right? You put those two together, and you haven't doubled the stress in your life. You've probably quadrupled it at some
No
level.
question. No
And
question.
where does somebody go for help? And I think a great first step is to reach out to Frank, because I mean, not only can he help you just grow a business and understand life and things, but if you're struggling with something, he's a safe place to go because he's been there, and he understands entrepreneurialism, if that's a word.
That is,
and
yeah.
he understands stress and managing all of this. And sometimes we just need somebody to talk with who will listen, and who has the perspective to ask the right questions and to be there for a season of your life. Sometimes it's a short season, sometimes it's a very long season. I mean, you're in a season for 20 years. That's
Yes,
a long season.
it is.
He's been there. So Frank, if somebody's out there listening and they're resonating with this, where do they go? How do they find you?
Well, the easiest thing, probably email, fdo@focalpointcoaching.com. My website is frankdo.focalpointcoaching.com or adversityconsultants.com.
Okay.
Because Adversity Consultants is my focus on the entrepreneurial caregiving person. So going
Okay.
through that adversity.
Okay. We will grab those and put them in the show notes, because, as you know, entrepreneurs are a little busy. They're always out doing something, but that's the beautiful thing about
Hopefully.
carrying one of these silly things in your pocket with a podcast app. You can listen to podcasts as you're driving, as you're walking the dog, as you're taking a walk, as you're processing, how am I going to deal with this stress? You do it by reaching out to Frank and just having that conversation, and he's going to resonate with you and connect with you because he's been there. And those are the best coaches I've ever had in my life, Frank. People who've been where I'm heading, and they can guide me through the storm, per se, and
Exactly.
to realize there's hope. There is a path forward, and you need guidance, and you need help, and you need somebody who can just take you by the hand and meet you where you are. I think Frank can do that for you.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, Michael, that open to great conversations all the time. And if not me, I have lots of resources and connections to connect people with the resources that are suitable for that person. So, when you do good work, the money just follows, and it's important to make sure that your fit and connection with the people that you're trying to work with is authentic, and so that authenticity really shines through when you do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man, Frank, thank you. Thank you for being here as my guest, but deeper, thank you for doing what you're doing with helping entrepreneurs deal with these stresses that we carry and we don't know what to do with them, and being a safe place. So I hope somebody in my audience reaches out to you and says, here's what I'm doing. Because I think you're a lot like me, dude. If I can just help one person really just make a connection or find the right resource, I'm a happy camper. And
Definitely.
that's what I hear through the line. So Frank, thank you for being here. I'll capture all that. It's in the show notes, how to reach out to Frank, and just help him allow him to help you live that life that you're really seeking for, and to navigate the pathways that you're on, whether or not you're dealing with a stressful situation with helping a loved one in need of some nature. But if you are, he's definitely the first step in that direction. So Frank,
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I really appreciate the time.
you are so welcome. I appreciate you being here. Have a great day, friend.
You too.